All right, we will get started with the 4B board meeting Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 at 6:33 p.m. All members are present except Member Torres. We will move to the public forum. Nobody in the public forum. We will close the public forum. Move to public hearing. Before I get started, I just want to say a big thank you to Eric Weiss for doing all the work that he did with our 4A, 4B Town Council meeting, joint meeting with the Rails to Trails. Did a great job. Hopefully that thing will come to finality soon. So thanks to Eric for that. Like we were just talking about, if you're interested, this Thursday and Friday is playoffs for the Sunnyvale Raider varsity baseball. Mark can tell you where it's at. I think it's in Princeton, isn't it?
At 7 p.m.
So if you're available, head on up there. All right. So we're open or continue public hearing, consider testimony and any other information provided, close public hearing, and then take necessary action with respect to the following. Do you want to do them all at once or?
No, individually.
Individually? All right. Number 1, public hearing on a financial incentive not to exceed $10,000 for the Vince Hagen Company. We just need to make a motion.
No, this is just a public hearing, so you'll open the public hearing, read the item, and then if anybody would like to speak, if not, close the public hearing.
All right. There's no one to speak on that. We will close the public hearing for item number 1. We will open public hearing for item number 2 on financial incentive not to exceed $53,334 for Baker's Ribs Incorporated. No one to speak. We will close the public hearing for item number 2. We will move to item number 3. Open the public hearing on the financial incentive not to exceed $20,000 for Hope Coffee Incorporated. No one to speak. We will close the public hearing. We will move on to discussion and action items. Number 4, discuss, consider, and act upon the regular meeting minutes for April 16, 2019.
Unfortunately, I did not get to those today, so if we could table them until next meeting.
All right, we will table meeting minutes for April 16, 2019. Move on to item number 5, discuss, consider, and act. That should be upon. Upon the April 2019 financial reporting and related financial items.
Act up.
Okay, I'll repeat the April financials, which include $62,140 for April for our sales tax revenue. We had expenses of $6,846.45, and that just relates to our standard payroll, landscape maintenance, other conference expenses and so forth. It also includes the irrigation and repairs of the 4 corners that we approved. Everything is still within our budget, and our ending fund balance as of the end of April is $2,855,033. That's the questions regarding the financials.
Any questions?
That's good.
Can I get a motion to accept the April 2019 financial reporting and related financial items?
I'll make the motion.
Motion made by member Van Vesten, seconded by member Weiss. All those in favor? Pass unanimous. Move on to item number 6, discuss, consider, and act upon the recommended 2019-2020 budget.
Karen, do you want to do this or
It doesn't matter to me. She wants to do it, she can. She wants me to do it, I can.
Phil? I'm good. I'm trying to remember what day it was. I think it was Friday on May the 10th. President Giordano, Treasurer Sarah Bradford, Tracy, and myself all met to discuss some preliminary numbers for your 2019-2020 budget. The form that's actually in your packet doesn't show any updates on it yet. So I'm just going to kind of go through here by these line items and let you know what we discussed. Nothing has been finalized, and of course, if there's any revisions or changes or additions that you feel like need to be made, then just go ahead and mention those. For promotional services, we decided to go ahead and increase that dollar amount. It can be equal to, it's got to be less than or equal to 10% of your sales tax receipts. So currently we have the sales tax receipt sitting at $862,500, which is exactly where we were when we amended the budget. Right now, it's still kind of early in the budget process, and we're not showing any changes to that. You can see that we left the revenue exactly at what we amended the 2018-19 budget. So for, let me go up here to the wages, the salary, and the benefits account first. We'll just start at the top. Those two, you'll see that those numbers are exactly what they were at as when we amended the 18-19 budget. No changes have been made to those numbers at this point. Administrative services, we still have that at $10,000. Landscape maintenance contract, that is your Paradise Lawns that maintains your four corners. That is a monthly fee of $945. That budgeted at $15,000 gives you a little bit of room should you have any irrigation repairs, at the four corners. The promotional services item is the item that we increased to $86,000. That is the item I was saying that it needs to be budgeted to be less than or equal to 10% of your sales tax revenue. We increased that budget amount to include some special events, a BRE event. So we just bumped that up an additional $36,000 for that. You can see for Jobson Park maintenance, Vineyard Park maintenance, Town Center Park maintenance, Samuel North, New Hope maintenance. We took all of those budgets back down to $0, and the consensus was to try to just pull all that money into one line item, and instead of saying we're going to do $5,000 for this part, $10,000 for that part. Let's put it all in one account, give it a budget of $75,000, and that would include maintenance for Jobson Vineyard, Town Center Park, Samuel North, and New Hope. So that will be a new account, a new line item that we'll be adding to the budget. For general office supplies, we raised that from $500 to $3,000, and the thought process with that was for Tracy is going to be bringing on board an administrative assistant, and there'll be some related office supplies for that position, and also for the purchase of some iPads. We left dues subscriptions and memberships. We raised by $500 from $5,500 to $6,000, and that was really to pick up the Main Street America subscription, which was or membership, which is new this year. We left the legal fees at $7,500. We left the outside training at $7,500. We created that new account for miscellaneous expense items and gave it a budget of $2,000. 4B doesn't really have a line item for things like if we purchase dinner for the meeting tonight, or if we have like the meeting we had the other day to discuss the budget and we bought lunch. So this is just a little room for those type of expenses that aren't related to a specific line item in your budget. The transfer out for the general fund in support of the parks budget, We have that listed at the same number right now that we have the 2018-19 budget at, and that is just simply because we're still in the process of, working on the general fund budget. So we don't know where the parks budget is gonna land right now, but just based on how tight things are running, you're gonna fall really close to that $218,000 mark again this year.
I'll just make a comment there, and just as a reminder, that $218,000 is calculated by taking 33% of the total parks budget. So if the park budget goes up, then our piece will go up. So we decided we're still gonna stick with the same 33%. It still seems to make sense, but.
I don't anticipate it going down, but it may go up just a few dollars. Again, we don't have the labor and benefits category. We're still waiting on some re-rate information from TML. So some of those numbers we don't have yet. Incentives, we are leaving at $500,000. So no change there, no change in town beautification. That is at $25,000. Parks and trails, we're leaving at $150,000, with the thought being the parks master plan that needs to be completed for next year. That would probably come out of that line item. And I think they have estimates.
Which one?
Right, and any
Parks and Trails.
cameras that we may have over here in Town Center Park.
Well, I think the cameras we talked about coming out of the park maintenance account, where we're combining all the park maintenance items. That's where we're gonna have the security cameras come out, and that's one of the reasons we bumped it up, because it seems like the cameras keep coming up in conversations, and there's, it's not like we could buy 4 cameras 3 years ago and be done with that expense. We're gonna have to support them ongoing, right? So cameras, I think we're gonna come out of maintenance, but as Phyllis was saying, the Parks Master Plan will come out of the Parks and Trails, and that right now we're estimating at around $100,000 to completely redo that.
Park land acquisition, we took that budget, that line item back down to $0 for this next year. I think, so we took that back down to 0. The Glacier Park improvements, this, we raised to $250,000. And I think that the thought on that is once the concept plan is completed, there will be some next steps. I don't know that there is a known cost, to those steps, but we opted to raise that up to $250,000. And the Rails to Trails project, we increased that by $500,000 to $750,000. With that said, that would give you total revenues for 2019-20 of $872,000. Oh my goodness. And $872,300, and your total expenses would be $2,157,917. That would put you going into your fund balance $1,285,617.
So I just want to add a few things to that as well. One, last time we talked to, Burton was here and he talked about some of the equipment, the tractor, the attachments that he needed. We've determined that that doesn't need to come back. That is actually going to be funded through the vehicle replacement fund for the new equipment. And so he'll be able to get that. So we don't have to add anything within our budget for that. The other thing is there were a couple of items for possibly Samuel Farm North, but currently Samuel Farm North is going to go forward. The City of Dallas is going forward with an RFQ process for Samuel Farm South, North, and New Hope. So we are kind of holding off on anything with Samuel Farm North until we figure out where that process is going. Right now there's a whole lot of unknowns and what that entails for Sunnyvale and how our lease is, and so until we hear back, they're going out for an RFQ here shortly, and then hopefully within the next several months they'll award it to somebody, and then we'll be able to talk to that consultant to kind of give them our ideas and feedbacks for what we'd like to see in the parks. So as that process comes further and closer and I get more details, I'll let you know about that. Some other things, the Parks Master Plan, we got that in there. One of the reasons for increasing the promotional item for the full 10% was to include events. We'll talk more about like an event subcommittee later on in the meeting. Being able to help fund some of the events that the town's looking for at kind of attracting and adding to the town. Being able to help, right now the parks budget only is allocated $20,000 for all the events that we do in Sunnyvale, so it relies heavily on being able to have sponsorships for the events to be able to conduct them. So being able to fund some of that if we can. The other thing that we were looking at coming out of promotional services was the idea of a tall 25-foot, bigger, smaller, around that size Christmas tree for the roundabout whenever it comes into play. So looking at purchasing that next year, if that would be acceptable. So that was another reason why that got increased as much as it did. I think that was it for promotional services. And then there are 3 new cameras that need to be added to Town Center Park. And so we had last year approved for 4 new cameras, but only 2 of them got replaced because we had a power surge or whatever. It took out all the cameras. They had to replace all the cameras. We only put up 2 out of what we had approved because they didn't want to add more cameras to the park and the same thing happen again. So it looks like everything's fine with whatever happened. But because we didn't spend it last year, it's just rolled over into our general fund. So that way, adding this to the park maintenance, we can now just have the cameras come out of that. The other thing, I'm going to take a closer look at the dues, subscriptions, and memberships. I'm not asking y'all to approve this tonight, just kind of showing you with a lot of information to kind of take in. We can get all these numbers changed up and send it out to you. And then next month, we'll look at it again. But looking at dues, subscription, and memberships, a couple of other additions. Maybe we're going to try this year for a Scenic City designation, and that's an $800 application fee just to apply for the designation. And I hadn't told Phyllis about these, so these were on my notes today while I was looking at everything. Another thing would be something called SketchUp. It's a yearly subscription that would help. I am not a geotechnical person that can draw these fancy 3D images of things, and we've asked Development Services a lot to create images of downtown, ideas for the Glacier Park, ideas for Barnes Bridge. And so being able to have this program, we'll be able to allocate some time that either I can learn it, Rashad can learn it, so that we can start getting better 3D images of kind of plans that we can put together. And that's $299 a year. And then the other thing that's being looked at is eCivis, which is a grant software program that kind of keeps track of if you apply for a grant, what that entails, who's involved, what the next steps are, if you got approved for the grant, the deadlines. It kind of keeps track of everything so that you stay on top of all the grants that you've applied for. And that's a $5,000 price tag, possibly splitting that in some way, shape, or form with the town. Another item was in the training expense, double checking that, and then the possibility of adding a tape, which is some sophisticated program that's supposed to help you with like the Six Sigma, get better organized and how to do things. And so that's a $5,000 price tag too, and somehow or another possibly splitting that with the town, as well as a public participation training, having somebody come in and kind of teach public participation. So like with the Glacier event that we did, making sure we're doing everything that we need to do to adequately get public participation. Also, the idea has come up of this part-time position possibly moving maybe next year sometime into a full-time position. And if that's the case, then I'll bring that to the board at that point in time, because that will add to the wages, TMRS, and all of that. That will no longer be an admin service fee. So that, I mean, it may be another year before that's determined. Oh, and then yes, there's gonna be another item that's gonna be added to our budget, and the town's taking a look at it now. We kind of have a, hate to call it this, but for lack of a better word, kind of like a office, not office supplies, but office maintenance type category, to where it we'll get, part of we need a new server here at Town Hall, and so paying for a portion of that server, paying for a portion of equipment, office supplies, things that the EDC utilizes on a regular basis. So there'll be a line item on that. It's still being determined what that amount is. So hopefully by next meeting, we'll be able to have some more definite numbers. We've also asked finance to take a look at the possibility of a finance account. We don't pay the finance department for all their services and all their times for everything that they do here. 4A puts in towards finance, a transfer into finance. So just being able to, Phyllis and Liz are going to talk about that possibility, or if there's a need for that. So that may be another item that comes into play, and it may not. That was a lot. Oh, and another thing that'll come into play with Rails to Trails is if we acquire the Rails to Trails project and we start doing the work on it, we will also be in charge of the M&O of it. Burton has sent what those numbers are. I have not taken a look at that yet, but we need to make sure. That's why 750 was what we were approved for to be able to spend in that category. So we want to utilize that, because it may be that we can start, purchasing the land, we can start building the trails, and then we have to make sure that we have the M&O side of it in there. A lot of information.
So you have all that in writing somewhere?
Yes. So what we'll do is, we've been so busy that I told Phyllis it wasn't a big deal to have all the numbers and everything into place for this meeting, because she is loaded down with a lot of things and Liz is out. Oh, she'll get to it between now and.
Yeah, it's really part of a whole package for, the budget committee and all that,
Okay.
we're working to update, but we'll include that. Again, like Tracy said, a lot of the things are just kind of information that's kind of been put out there. We don't have costs related to them yet, and we don't know exactly if they're going to be shared costs or if they're going to be just the general fund picking those up. But we feel like in the next couple of weeks, we'll start to firm up some of those numbers. We're still waiting on a cost from our in-house IT group, Axios, for them to, let us know what the server update is going to cost. It's reaching its end of life. And so if we don't make the necessary changes, we're going to be without. But hopefully, like I said, in the next, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some firmed up numbers so that we can update this spreadsheet and include all these items on there. It seems early, but looking at the calendar, it's really not that early, to be going into this, I guess. But we're just on the heels of having completed our mid-year budget adjustments, and now we're, jumped right into 2019-20, and there are a lot of projects. I'm sure you all are aware of the CIP projects out there for the town, and so there is a lot of trying to, get kind of lean and, in a lot of our budget items so that the funds are available for us to, participate in taking care of some of these projects. When I say us, I mean the general fund. I don't mean 4B.
So sometime soon you'll have the updated
Yes.
purple sheet, and then all those other, and some of those sound like hard facts and some of them sound like wish list facts, so are they all planned?
Which ones are you asking? There are things.
Everything that you started after you got to the bottom of this chart.
Well, some of the things that we discussed were things that might show up on next year's mid-year
Right.
budget amendment. So if we don't have a good roadmap of some of the.
Might amend and so,
I
yeah.
would say the bulk of it that they just went through will be contained in this,
Okay.
but there may be a few asterisks that we may need to look at later in the year.
Cool.
If we can't find a way to cover off on them in an existing category.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and I'll lay it all out, whenever we get the updated list. I'll lay out everything that I just went through and what we were looking at and why we did each item the way we did, because I have to take that and explain it to the budget committee on why we're doing what we're doing. So we have, next month to take a look at it as well, and then I originally said June, but we have to have our budget approved no later than July, because we have to have our budget approved 60 days prior to the start of the fiscal year. So, but next month for finance purposes, we really need to kind of have in line what we're going to put together.
And just to provide a little bit of context, you know, we're currently running at about $1 million ahead on our budget now. So and I don't expect that to change much, because our sales tax revenue for the rest of the year is going to cover the little bit of expenses that we have, routine stuff, and most of the big ticket items that we have in our current year budget are going to roll into next year as well. So, you know, I think on a net basis, you know, some of the numbers were big, but it's not going to completely wipe us out.
We don't need to make any kind of motion on this, we're just gonna press it the next month.
And since, you know, the remaining members of the board, you know, weren't present at the meeting, I didn't know if y'all had any other recommendations you wanted to make for this year's budget, or excuse me, next year's budget.
Or any questions?
What was the $5,000 for training on how to get more public participation? Maybe that's the wrong way to say it.
I'm really not, all I know is it's called public participation training, and it's about $5,000. I don't know who that is, what that is,
No.
why that is.
So that's still,
That's,
we'll
That's
figure
one
it
of
out.
the
Yeah,
and
items
see if
we'll figure it
that's
out later.
kind of up in the air.
And that wouldn't be a $5,000 cost to 4B, it would be a shared cost.
Yeah. Wow.
If they decide to move forward. A lot of these are what we're calling supplemental items. You know, they're not really a part of fixed costs for us, and, you know, they're kind of items that we're kind of waiting to see where we're going to end up once we have all our revenues in place and our you know, our hard costs line up. And then if the money is available, then we may go out there and try to participate in some of these other items, and then it would come before y'all to see if you know, wanted to share in some of those costs.
any questions? All right, move on to item number 7. Discuss, consider, and act upon a recommendation to the town council to create an events subcommittee to manage.
So we want
Thank
the
you, Phyllis.
town council to manage the event subcommittee, is that what it is?
No, town council does not want to manage it, they want
Yeah,
us to
us to
manage
manage
it.
Recommendate, but it says a recommendation to the town council to create an event subcommittee.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's all.
There you go, us.
Yeah, us, yeah.
They become like, they want us to do all kinds of stuff
If there's anything.
at all
I can
costs.
help with, let me know. Whatever's easiest for you.
Among other things.
I
They
know.
haven't got to it.
I know, again, prior communities I've lived in, public events that are like festivals and all that all fall under the Parks Department. And then the Parks Department, which was substantially larger, then created subcommittees for the various festivals or the, you know, parades and all that. But you ended up with, you had a lot of different committees. You didn't just have
Subcommittees.
one. So, yeah.
Who manages the Sunny Fest event now?
So in the past, it's been Robert Blackburn. He kind of handled it all on his own. He went out for sponsorships, he did all the signage, he pretty much planned it from start to finish by himself. So now it's just become time consuming and should not be a one-person show. Not only that, the town is wanting to add, and we kind of have it in our strategic plan to create an events committee, add more festivals, events. So the idea is that because we don't have a parks board, which this would typically fall under, it's thought that maybe 4B kind of acts as that parks board. And so the idea of creating kind of a committee, events committee, and it would kind of be managed by the 4B board or overseen by the board. The thought process, I guess, behind it is that adding events funding to our budget, being able to help and facilitate some of that, and as closely as we work with the Parks Department anyway, it just seemed like the thought is that it felt like it was a good fit to be underneath us so that we can kind of stay on top of all the things that are going on. The idea is to form a committee of kind of a lot of everybody, people from the town, the school district, the chamber, DSO, fire, anybody from 4B board.
Kind of like the CIP.
Kind of, but the people or organizations that do events here, and that way we're not stepping on anybody's toes, and everybody that's at the table can say, well, I have an event this day, and then we end up with an events calendar that we can
Makes
put
sense.
together, and all working together collaboratively as a community. So kind of have this on here to get your thoughts and feedback, and then if y'all would like to move forward with being able to have this, then we will take it to town council to recommend that we put together an events committee overseen by the 4B board.
So would the committee actually manage the events? Like be in charge of the sign?
Yes. And we've kind of started that with Sunny Fest this year. We've now got a committee that's been working together, and we've got the different Gantt charts and stuff to keep us in line and what needs to be done, what needs to be ordered. So we have a lot more people now that are able to, Burton has been able to delegate things. So
It
it's making
seems,
a lot smoother.
to me, it seems logical.
Yeah.
And then as the population grows and the community grows and we're able to staff it appropriately, if you end up with a true
Events.
parks
Events.
department
Yeah, park
and
department.
recreation department and stuff like that, and with events. And there's people that are really passionate about that stuff, so if they want to volunteer and we can put together, I agree with you though, to have school, town, the various seats that have to be filled, and then volunteers for the rest of it.
And even some local churches too, I think we talked about, that
Reaching
have,
out to
that
them.
have similar events and timing. So I think it's a great idea and definitely the direction we need to move.
Would seem like you would pick a liaison or something from us, unless there was events that everybody wanted to participate in.
So if y'all are in favor of this, then just having a motion to recommend to town council to create.
So is there a reason why we don't have you said Parks Board or something? So do
Parks
other
Board.
municipalities have park boards like 4B, but they focus on this kind of stuff, or?
So typically, yes, but larger communities, they have the parks department. We don't even really have a parks department. It's just kind of parks and recreation. It's not really a whole, I guess the way it's budgeted out, it's not a department in itself. And then normally that would be, a parks board would manage the parks department, kind of like 4B manages the economic development. So they haven't been big enough really to.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And most parks departments, or most parks boards aren't managing sales tax revenue and a budget like we're managing. It's line itemed out separate
It's just
from
another
economic
department.
development.
Any questions? Can I get a motion to move forward and
I make a
motion to town council to create an event subcommittee to manage? Motion made by member Eldred, seconded by member Weiss. All those in favor? Passed unanimous. Move on to item number 8. Discuss, consider, and act upon recommendations to reopen Barnes Bridge Park and potential plans for the park.
So this item is a request by the mayor to see if 4B had any recommendations or thoughts on the Barnes Bridge Park. Kind of just reminded that town council had said that that wouldn't be open, and so we hadn't looked twice at it. They said to kind of see where that is, talk to Sergeant Evans, see what his thoughts are. Talked to Sergeant Evans, he said that it could be reopened, but it just depends. What are you gonna put there? Are you gonna have hours? Are you gonna have a gate that closes at night? Who's gonna take care of that gate? And so there are a lot of factors that still are coming into play. So my question, I guess more so right now is Barnes Bridge a top priority that we need to consider right now? Or are there other priorities that we're kind of handling right now and talk about Barnes Bridge at a later date?
I think it's, it's appropriate to talk about, but for the rest of y'all, the 2 meetings that we've had with the property manager for Luminant Vistra TXU, both times they've thanked us for shutting that down because it's helped the security of their plant. And they said they had problems with swimmers, especially when the lake was low, because they have it marked out there where their water inlets are for the plant, and people would literally swim across them, and they're telling people to stay out because the fence goes out into the water, but then as the lake drops and people swim around it, and then there's a little island that pops up at lower levels. But in visiting with them today, we said we'd want to be good neighbors, as we're attempting to move forward with the acquisition of the rail spur, to be good neighbors to talk to them about what may or may not happen there. But separate from that, and visiting with other citizens and stuff, questions have come up similar to Glacier on public-private type ventures. And at present, there isn't a Western Shore Marina on Lake Ray Hubbard. So it might be to me, something like that, to either have a boat ramp with facility out there that's run and managed by potentially a private organization that locks it up at certain hours, would allow use of the facility during the day, but then shut it down unless they've got supervision all night long, like some marinas do, where people can go out there 24/7. But that seems like a potential viable use for it. But I don't know. We got a lot of other things in the fire right now, so.
Is it currently being like mowed or maintained, or is it just like grown into a forest?
No, currently our Parks Department takes care of it.
Okay. And do we own it?
No.
We do not own it. We have an interlocal agreement with the city of Dallas that we maintain it. So when we went into an interlocal agreement for the shoreline, that was part of it.
How long has it been closed?
2 years?
About a year and a half, 2 years now.
Yeah, it goes quick.
I drove out there the other day when I was doing trail stuff, and it looks nice. I mean, the gate they put up after they had the chain, it looks nice, and it was all mowed and clean.
Is the mayor getting contacted by people who want to use it? 'Cause- so I'm not disinterested in it. I do think we have other bigger priorities right now. But maybe what we could do is in our budget, in the park maintenance line item where we list out all the parks, let's just make sure to include Barnes Bridge Park on that list. And then maybe, I honestly haven't thought of any long-term plans, but I think Eric's idea is a fabulous one. I just have no idea how to go about it.
My recollection is there's no facilities out there, is that correct? I mean, there's no
Nothing.
power,
It's
water.
a blank
it's
slate,
just
I
a-
think.
Never mind the power company.
So I mean, even if you just, I just thought when you were talking about it, if somebody wanted to lease it for an event, well, there's nothing out there to utilize,
I
but
think there's power out there because they've had light poles, but they couldn't keep the lights up because people kept shooting them
shoot them
out.
out.
So I think there's electricity out there,
But there's no,
but I don't think about
Plumbing
restroom facilities or
facilities.
plumbing or anything like that.
How close is it to the rail line?
it,
Walking distance?
oh yeah, eventually it would be
A fifth of a
just
mile.
to shoot a trail down the side of Barnes Bridge or to, and that's the other neat thing with the trails and the grants money, is you can get grant money for bike lanes to pave the shoulder. So it could be a hike bike lane that goes down there.
Is it something we could do an RFP for? Send out and get ideas from companies?
We could, if that's something y'all want to do.
I don't feel like it's a huge priority either, but
Right.
I think if we move forward with the rails to trail, that's the right time to then incorporate that, because that would be the start of the trail or the end.
Could be
So it could
a
be
hub.
a grand start or finish, and then, like you said, connected to the trail, which is like a fifth of a mile away. Then it would, I think that'd be the right time to make investments there. Although at that point we'll have a lot of funding needs to do the rail, but if we start there, then
The nice thing is at that location, there's actual parking, so
Yeah.
it could be a
It can
trailhead.
still be incorporated into the plan
Right.
and, that, you know, that we're gonna piecemeal and develop anyway,
Mhm.
hopefully.
So I don't see an immediate need,
No.
but definitely have a line item to keep it on our.
well, and I think a year and a half is quite a bit of time to have the people that were visiting it to have moved on to do some other
Go
things.
home?
But, yeah,
Give up.
but it's not long enough that they don't remember it anymore.
Yeah.
So the longer it's closed, I think the less they'll even attempt to stop by. You know?
When I do go that way to like come down and go back around instead of taking Collins, it's amazing how many people you still see going down there and
Down
turning
the
around.
back, yeah.
So I mean, there's
Yep.
probably one out of every 3 cars that goes down Barnes Bridge still goes down
Yep.
there and turns around.
Never mind the big dead end sign they put, no
Mhm.
outlet. Doesn't help. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, we just, I mean, it hasn't been on our radar because, you know, we knew it was getting shut down and we weren't gonna do anything, so, I mean, like you said, at some point we can look at it, but it's not on the top.
I agree.
Oh, just for the record, the dog park we've talked about, that would be an awesome place to put it, just because dogs like to jump in the water, so.
Yeah.
As long as they don't, as long as they don't swim to the plant.
You can get
Yeah,
sucked
right.
into it.
they're probably smarter.
We'll try to-
Yeah, they're smarter than humans, but I like the idea of an RFP that has all these different components, but
Yeah, but I think if we have the Rails to Trails kicked off, then more companies would be interested and
yeah, and sponsoring it, maybe paying for some of the naming rights for the park itself, or,
Chicken does it all the time. They
yeah,
love
they
it.
love it, yeah,
Yeah.
mine too.
So no action needs to be taken, just
Yeah.
up for discussion.
All right, we will move on to item number 9, discuss and consider an update on Vineyard Park survey and field lighting.
So aside from what you have in your packet, we received the completed survey yesterday. So we are able to work with Clark Electric now. I'm having the town engineers reviewing the survey. Clark Electric emailed me yesterday and said that if we don't get the materials ordered by the end of this week, the prices are going up 15% starting on Monday. So I've had them go ahead and order the equipment and told them we had the survey in hand, just reviewing it, and then we'll get those surveys sent over to them just as soon as we can. I just got an email from him. If I get all the CADs and stuff sent over to them, then they can look at it and they'll put everything into place to get to us so that we can get it approved and they can move forward once the equipment comes in.
Nothing, right? Yeah.
It's just verifying the property lines are in.
We just had to get
What do we have to get approved at this point?
The survey.
nothing, so we had to get a survey done because we didn't
Alright.
have the survey lines, so that's all we had to,
That's
we,
it.
I gotcha.
Oh, I thought you
Clark-
said you were bringing something to us to
No,
approve.
Clark Electric is gonna put together all the layouts and stuff that they need, send it to me and just get the, yes, that looks good.
Oh.
And then we
So
can
you
move
got
forward.
what
So
you need.
nothing,
Okay,
nothing
cool.
brought back to the board. We have run into, a little, I wouldn't say it's any huge deal. There was a fence that was just built, by one of those property owners, and they're actually encroaching into our property by 1.5 feet. So
It's a big difference.
we,
So they get to move it.
kind of talked to development services about what we should do, how to take care of it. It's really not gonna bother us to any degree. It's gonna be set back enough. We can still set back the lights at the property line. The only thing, we'll talk to the property owner, let them know that it is encroaching so that they know, should there, we've talked about doing the drainage on that property. If we have to utilize that area, then they're gonna have to take care of their fence line, so.
Yeah, you gotta legally notify, or technically over time, they could take ownership if nobody does anything.
Yeah, as long as that's in writing somewhere.
Right.
Covered not only us, but the town.
The surveyor just let us know, so that was all in the email yesterday, so we just heard about all this as of yesterday, so we're working on what we need to do.
How much was the survey? Do you know?
It was, right under $10,000. It was to do the survey of the complete a little over 6 acres, and then a topography of the park itself.
Include the water tower?
The survey did, the
The
topo
survey,
did not.
yeah.
The survey included the library, the fire station, the water tower,
I know, I
and
just-
Vineyard Park.
Find that funny.
What, they built the water tower and never had a survey?
Yeah.
So apparently,
could've
a
been a major
survey was
survey.
done of the water tower site, just by itself.
Oh, okay. I would hope so. Like, man,
At least that's what we think.
you're encroaching on my property. Yeah, take it, move it.
So again, just an update, no action needed.
All right, we'll move on to item number 10, discuss and consider an update on rails to trails.
Eric, you wanna do that one?
Sure. So today, Tracy, the town manager,
You wanna turn your mic, so, I don't know if we're on.
Tracy, myself, town manager, and Councilman Clark, as well as the founder of Friends of Sunnyvale Trails, David Holly.
David Holly.
We met with Mr. Box of, again, Luminant, TXU, Vistra, property manager. We walked through a presentation that was based on the last presentation that we did. I've got the Cliff Notes version here if anybody wants to look at it. And made an official offer to purchase the rail spur. He requested a soft copy of the presentation, a few other documents. He wanted the copy of he said he didn't need the resolution, but we're gonna provide the resolution from Dallas County Commissioners Court, the Town Council, as well as the Sunnyvale Independent School District. We're gonna do it by Dropbox, so copy all the stuff that he needs into it, including information on safe routes to schools. And then he said he should know something by the end of the week on what the initial thought is on the offer. We received a quote to do a phase 1 environmental study on the corridor, and then the offer, meaning the town, 4B offered to cover the cost. He said TXU would want to do that themselves, so we'll go back and forth on that, But all in all, it seemed like a really positive meeting. He'll review everything once we get the format to him, which we should be able to do that tomorrow. And then within the next couple of weeks, they'll have a meeting with the property committee, which, if I understood him correctly the first time, is the TXU board of directors, to get hopefully an affirmative acceptance of the offer, or the other option that we still said, we're still fully open to a donation of the spur. And then we would have the associated cost of the inspections and stuff like that, but we'll see where it goes.
Sweet.
What was the offer?
Can't say out here. I can tell you in
Okay.
there.
It was along the same lines of what we talked about in our joint meeting, if you remember what that.
Hey, it was a broad range, but I'll get it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they haven't indicated that there is any other interest.
No, they seem really interested in the project and want to see it succeed. He brought up that they understand that the town does not use TXU as their current energy provider, and so their marketing person is going to reach out. and visit with Susan about that, which is a logical thing to do.
Are we in a contract with
Yep.
somebody?
Apparently the city, which makes sense, I guess, the city's under a power contract, just like most individuals, and,
I wonder when that expired.
right, and so that's where
Okay,
Susan is gonna manage all that.
gotcha. Cool.
Town manager will manage that. I'm assuming they might potentially have the same question for the schools, so I was gonna reach out to Doug, because I have no idea who they use. But anything that we can do to have a win-win with them, we mentioned the
Yeah.
naming rights again, and who knows?
I think they ought to be excited about it. It's a great use of their property.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a win-win, like you said.
No maintenance for that
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they wanted to play it right, they could get a lot of PR out
They
of
could.
it. Or maybe contact their marketing department, I don't know.
Right, well, Susan was gonna visit with, her name's Connie Schaefer,
The marketing department is
It-
gonna contact her.
the marketing department, and that's what she mentioned. She's like, there'll be ribbon cuttings, events, all sorts of things that we can do, so.
They look like really good guys.
Yeah.
They
Mhm.
do it.
I'm excited, we
I
should
think Luminant Trail would be.
know something here in the near future, and then
No-brainer.
so we have an official offer out and on the table. Once the offer is accepted, then we have, the legal steps that have to be taken, in the public hearings and all that kind of stuff, so. But if everything continues to move forward,
Awesome.
we'll be able to meet the deadline. We also, if you hadn't heard, passed the first phase of the grant application for the Safe Routes to Schools. So we made it through the first cut and moving up the ladder, and this will only help since we're moving forward with the acquisitions.
Fantastic.
And Friends of Sunnyvale Trails will be up and active again rapidly here in the near
Where
future.
did
so.
the Hollies move to?
They're building a house by White Rock,
Oh, okay, so not too far.
but they're still avid cyclists and cycle through here and
Yeah.
want to see it succeed, so.
Good.
Yeah. Great work, huh?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Anything else?
That took care of it.
All right, we'll move on to item number 11. Discuss and consider an update on the Glacier Property Master Plan.
Michael, you wanna handle this? I'll just sit back.
It's in the same spot it's been.
So we've got the committee meeting again with our consultant on May 31st. We're gonna review all the documents that were provided from the public participation meeting to kind of see if we can incorporate some of the ideas that came out of that meeting that would make sense in what we were looking at already. Past that, it will determine kind of the next step. It'll be for the consultant to put together a preliminary master plan. That preliminary master plan will be brought before the boards and council and for further feedback, and then from there we'll move to the complete master plan. So as of right now, I won't know any other kind of timeline until after this May 31st meeting. But just know that it's not gone stagnant. We've picked it up. We're having a date. We just don't feel like, or I didn't feel like, if you have a public participation meeting, you get all this public input, it doesn't make any sense to not kind of look at it and see if we can incorporate those things. So just taking that and seeing how we can utilize some of the feedback and thoughts from that meeting. That's it.
All right, we'll move on to item number 12. Discuss, consider, and act upon the economic incentive guidelines.
Here's my baby sitting on the dais, all for you to see. You obviously will not have time to look at this and approve anything tonight. Didn't expect y'all to, but my goal was to have this completed for this meeting, and I shut my door, and that's what I did all day. So kind of run you through it a little bit. This is the full incentive policy that I would like for everybody to review over the next couple of weeks. If you can add your bedtime reading material and provide any input so that I can make any of those changes prior to our June meeting, so that when we meet in June, we can hopefully approve it and move forward. So you have your table of contents, general purpose and objectives, just kind of saying that we take a look at these, what we hope to create, job creation, looking at high-quality, unique jobs. We do look on these at a case-by-case basis. And then you move into methodology, it talks again about case-by-case basis, that the incentives may be utilized only as inducements. Basically, that if they've already got a building permit, they're already moving forward, they're not getting an incentive. These are for preliminary prospects only, not somebody who's already committed to coming to Sunnyvale. Then you move into criteria and what that looks like, kind of outlining some of the eligible projects, because a lot of people have questions on what we can fund, what incentives we can put towards. So that'll kind of outline what 4A and 4B as a whole can do. And then going into page 4, available incentives, we have our tax abatement for real and for personal property. In that, we have a resolution 1506 that already outlines the guidelines for what we look for and will approve for tax abatements. So I took that verbiage and put it in there, and then put together a table that kind of shows a minimal capital investment, the years of abatement we would consider, and the percentage of that abatement. Then you have fee-based incentives, fee waivers, just kind of looking at building permit fees and impact fees, and if the town would be willing to waive or reduce those fees. Infrastructure improvements, a lot of 4A does most of the infrastructure improvements, but as you've seen in some of the agreements we've looked at those. Fast track town services, this is added in there. I have not talked to Rashad about that. I need to talk to him about it because I have his name in here. So just saying that the town will kind of put a liaison with Development Services Director to be able to see that project through and be able to fast track it through the town. Job creation, I kind of debated back and forth on whether we really wanted to put anything about job creation in there, but I guess essentially it never hurts. So looking at what normally for job creation is, you look at our county wage, and unfortunately our county wage with Dallas is above $62,000 for a job to come in to be able to utilize anything with job creation. So when you're looking at these floor workers that are only making $35,000, $40,000 a year, but they're good jobs and we want them, then how do we take a look at that? So if you kind of noticed, I did a 75 to 100% of what the total Dallas County wage is, and so that it comes in below that, so compensating for some of that, and it gives a number per job, and that's payable each year. They have to keep those at least 25 jobs over a 2-year period, and we would pay out per year. So that outlines that. Then matching grants, that we would do matching grants. You know, we've looked at some of the tenant finish out, so saying that we would reimburse up to 50% of those tenant finish out costs. Other incentives, just including our sales tax rebate, cash grants, training grants, relocation assistance. And then kind of a targeted incentive, we've talked about how do we justify our areas and what we're looking at doing, and really say, well, we want this area over this year, or this area, why are we giving this person rather than this person an incentive? So laying out what we have looked at and talked about with the specialty retail, entertainment, restaurants, that we want those unique businesses and we're willing to pay for those businesses. And then also section B of that one, the location. So this is where I kind of wanted a little bit of feedback, because I kind of picked these based on what I thought the priorities are, A being the highest priority, E being the lowest priority, and where we would look at incentivizing in different areas. So I put our town center district kind of essentially as the highest priority at 352 South Collins area, the US Highway 80, the Beltline corridor, specifically at Town East and Beltline, and then just the Beltline corridor in general. Thoughts or?
I just had one. I mean, I understand going back to, you know, it's primarily for attracting people to the town. I forgot about it until reviewing this, but I've sat on a review board for kind of like beautification and improvement projects for both commercial and residential in a different community I used to live in. And so it was up to the individuals to apply, or they could be referred by somebody else if they were doing things to improve the outward appearance of their business, in the community, and then they had it for residential as well when somebody was, you know, redoing the facade of a house or whatever else they were doing, or redoing a lot, or to me that might be another thing. I don't know if that would fall under.
So I took facade grant out of this one and do a whole nother actual facade grant program.
Okay.
But it would just be kind of like a one-pager document that outlines what that is and what it would consist of. I have a couple of examples of those, but I can
And I don't know if it
see.
would be a thing I was thinking of. It wasn't necessarily a grant, because, well, maybe it was, but it was competitive, meaning committee every year went through and reviewed everything and then voted on who they thought should receive what, you know, but within whatever the guidelines were.
We could look at something like that too. I know a lot of them do 50% matching up to $10,000, and so if some business wanted to, I don't know about the residential side of it, so that's interesting, but if somebody wanted to come and apply for redoing their facade, then absolutely.
Or
So-
potentially for those individuals that have horses at their own private property, do they get an incentive grant? That's just a joke. Serious as well.
On the job creation
Mhm.
portion, so, I mean, I think that's a good idea. I'm just,
Mhm.
and I think you said this already, but, so they can't apply for multiple incentives, right?
They can.
Oh, they can?
Mhm.
Okay, so if we had a company come in here,
They could do a tax
They could
abatement
have-
and a job creation incentive.
but they could apply for a 50, 50 jobs and get 50 grand from us for that.
They could. Now, keep in mind, they have to meet those requirements. So at the end of the year, should they have met and kept those 50 jobs, then they would get paid out for only half of that amount. And then they would have to keep that and show, again, at the end of the next year, that they kept that number to receive the other half.
So it's basically, they meet all the requirements where they get nothing. Right?
Correct.
Okay. I didn't know if we needed to add language, or instead of saying the incentive is $1,000 per job, maybe we could say up to up to 25. If it's clear that if they don't meet the requirements, they get 0, then.
And it's laid out, it's going to be laid out later saying that all incentives have to go through a performance agreement. And in that performance agreement, you have to meet your certain criteria.
So are the amounts per job, was that something that's like standard out there?
I've kind of benchmarked it to a couple of different ones and actually lowered it compared to what some of them were.
I'm just curious. My other question is on the locations under B, what would US Highway 80 be, Highway 80, what would that be if it's not State Highway 352 South Collins? Because there's really nothing else.
And these
Well,
work,
a lot of that's zone commercial, so it's open, you know, from the eastern border all the way to.
I guess going back
Mesquite.
towards East Fork,
yep,
Right,
is there some out? Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
so,
As soon as you come into Sunnyvale all the way to the end of our ETJ, it's all zone commercial development. So I know 4A has looked more at kind of infrastructure improvements along 80, and so taking those things into consideration for hotels, businesses. We have several businesses looking at some available properties right now along Highway 80.
Gotcha.
So for me, under locations, I would prioritize the Beltline corridor at Town East and Beltline, maybe all the way up to item B, and put State Highway 352 and South Collins further down. Just with the Kearney's property being redeveloped, and I mean, that's a good development area right there at that corner. And it'd be great to have more businesses that would support the Kearney sort of idea, because that's really the type of business we wanted to see in Sunnyvale. And the more we can build up around it, the more those sort of things will flourish. It's hard when they're one-offs by themselves. Right now, I don't know if Pawn Shop is the best neighbor for them.
They're still in business.
is that zone commercial north of Kearney's to the Sun Street?
Yes.
Yeah, all, everything's commercial.
What do you
So-
guys think?
You talking about like the vacant land?
So
Yeah,
moving
where that cell tower
D
is.
to B, and
That's
then
my
just
opinion.
moving all those down, or do you see Highway 80 as more important than 352?
I don't have as much of a preference between those two. They're kind of in the same sort of.
I would make State Highway 352 in South Collins, I would make that A, because that's what we're trying to develop now and get, I mean, that's how we're gonna get the people into Sunnyvale. And then I don't care after that as far as whether or not you put the town center district or the Beltline corridor to Dickies Point next. US Highway 80, you know, other, we definitely go to D. But, I mean, the town center district doesn't even exist yet, and we're trying to.
Is that
Well,
the
that's here.
Sunnyvale Town Center with the loop, or is that the new
No,
downtown?
that's the new downtown.
Okay.
Well, I guess you'd look at next door, is in that town center
Yeah,
district.
that's what I figured you were talking.
True, but still, we have, I mean, the volume that we need to get in the door to make the Four Corners.
And Four
we're not
Corners
gonna
would
be able
include
to
the
have-
loop road then, right?
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to have and survive with just a quick trip and one Metaphor businesses that get
But are
introduced,
they,
in my opinion.
are those the type of businesses we want to give incentives to, like the Chick-fil-A's and the Quick Trip?
Well, not necessarily, I mean, if you're, I guess I'm thinking of it as priority from an economic development standpoint. But, right, it still depends on the type of business, which would go to targeted incentives.
Yeah, I think the more remote locations would require more incentives to develop than those high traffic areas. Those are gonna develop at some point, right? So the last thing I think we want is to get a bunch of, not big boxes, but big chains that start asking for handouts. Because they're the ones that are gonna go in the high traffic areas. So I like the suggestion specifically because of the Kearney's piece that that's the kind of business, and while it is a high traffic area, town east and Beltline,
It's oddly developed.
it is very oddly developed, yeah.
But what else, I mean, there's not a lot of open areas over there either.
You've got the south of Kearney's and north of Kearney's, basically. And then on the other side, between your neighborhood and,
Oh,
well,
the
between your neighborhood,
lands.
basically. Right. The corner that's not in your neighborhood of Beltline and,
And just so it's known, I put that one out specifically because that is our exit entry off of 190. So that seems to be the one to kind of
which one?
make sure the town east and
Town east.
Beltline kind of separated that out from the whole Beltline corridor because that's our entry and exit off of 190.
It's
So
gonna
that
go
one
all
should
the way,
be done
yeah.
properly.
That makes sense. The only other thing that, it's really not on the radar screen, but seems like it should be, would be the lake, whatever it's called, the Lake District. That could be farther down there, but when 190 starts to.
And that'll be 10 years out. So I
Yeah, it doesn't.
guess I wasn't even.
Yeah, but I mean, that's where, you can put that way down at the bottom, but
I hope.
You're gonna still be
Take your
here
time.
10 years, we won't.
Keep taking your time.
I plan on being in Sunnyvale.
And plus,
But we won't
once,
be on the 4B block.
once 190 goes through there, I'm sure that's gonna be prime real estate to incentivize.
Yeah, I think our priority may shift.
Yeah.
That kind of.
So I like the
But
suggestion
that's
Nikki
the
made.
question is what are we, when we say priority, is it priority for the type of business or like what I was talking about with, because I imagine the 190 is gonna be big box stuff too, just like,
But I think
The
you're
Four Corners.
combining two different things. This
Yeah,
one's
'cause it-
specifically for location. What is your priority location, no matter what it is?
right, I understand that,
Okay.
which was my point, but then we started talking about prioritizing the locations because of the types of businesses we think are going to be coming to those locations. And that's where I'm struggling with understanding how
So in terms
how
of
to prioritize.
prioritizing the location, that doesn't really impact the actual dollar amount of the incentive, does it?
It could.
Could.
So that's if you're looking at a project that
you know, compared to something else. And you have to make a decision whether you want to fund this one at 100% or fund this one at 100% or 75%. And you're looking at all the different criteria, and location is being one of those criteria.
Right.
And maybe need to go back, we've talked about doing a point system. We had the point system on the tax abatements, and somehow or another finding a way to do that on some of these. But I think it's kind of hard sometimes. But if you add 5 points or whatever, anyway, you have a top priority that you want to look at the town center district, then you're going to look at that application that's in that center for the higher percentage than you would for one that's just sitting out on Beltline.
Yeah, so basically, if all things were equal with two different businesses, but one was going in this location versus this location,
Right.
what would make
That
us
makes
more
sense.
interested in, and that's what I was trying to say, is if we're going to give an incentive and all things are equal between two businesses, then it does come down to, okay, where do we want them to put their business? But it does
depends on the
depend,
business,
but it
because
just,
you wouldn't want
exactly, it does
Right.
depend on the type of business as well, so.
Yeah, you wouldn't incentivize a big box in our town center district, even if that were our first priority. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yep. For me, I agree with moving the town center down until we actually have one, or one that's actively planned. I like all that's going into it, but until there's a definition, it's kind of hard to incent
But
somebody to go.
I
Just
thought-
put this order is subject to change.
There you go.
Depending on the whims of the board.
At the discretion of.
Amended biannually.
Well, I mean, because
bi-weekly.
realistically, I mean, a year from now, who
Right.
knows
Yeah.
what the, things are gonna be like.
Four corners may be developed and we move on to something else.
So just to clarify, town center district, is that the downtown thing or is that not? Because I read that as you hope this area there, or if something
Well, it
comes.
would be the bank and the
So-
Salswood
Uh-huh.
property and anything that goes across the street, right?
Town center district essentially is from 80 to Tripp
Okay.
on the east and west sides of Collins.
Okay.
So on the west side to Town Center Park, on the east side all the way to the Rails to Trails.
So it's
So are
not
you-
just the downtown thing that we talked about at the session.
Correct.
It's
This
all this area. Okay.
incorporates the Sunnyvale Park Square, it
So-
incorporates the possibility of something on this
So
corner.
just because we
So
don't
this-
have a plan for that doesn't mean that that can't be our priority, right? Like,
And one bit of feedback that's come is from next door is that they're having trouble getting a restaurant
mm-hmm.
because everybody's like, wait till the road's done. So potentially having the higher priority of incentive would, I mean,
That's what I mean.
eventually they're gonna come once the road is done, is basically what I'm hearing, but
Well, my guess is if somebody plans to come into this building, they're not gonna be looking at possibly going over there.
Right.
It's gonna be more of a targeted, thing, so I don't know if we'll be faced with that decision, but, so, the 352/South Collins, so that does not include then the northwest and northeast corners. Those you're including in
The
the town center district. Okay. Can we put town center district / North Collins, just to make that more?
Or-
or Collins.
80 to Trip or
Mm-hmm.
80 to SISD.
To roundabout number one.
Or maybe say north
Christmas
of
tree
Highway
one.
80, and then the other one say
Fourth one.
south of Highway 80. I don't know.
Okay.
But I agree, the other US Highway 80 should be pushed down. I think we can argue for any of the A, B, and C to be a viable
Yeah, I think
priority,
they're all-
depending on the type of business and the timing, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Well, we know what's going on now, so that maybe, at least while we're creating this, to focus in on those things that are active right now.
I mean, I can't
Over
see
time
us
it
getting